And we're live! Hello everyone, and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host as usual, the Dungeon Master Vibe. So before we get started, first off, let me apologize for Saturday's stream. Saturday's stream kind of just ended up not really happening. The plan was I was going to be playing some Tarkov and some other online games with some friends, but between some coordination issues as well as internet issues on my side of things due to getting a new modem, stream just kind of ended up not happening. I do apologize for that. But we're back to the regular schedule this week, so nothing to worry about. As for what we've got for us today, although early Dungeons & Dragons stream, I thought I'd try something a little different. I thought I'd kind of give a breakdown and thoughts and whatnot on some of the classes in D&D. In particular today, I thought I'd go over the Artificer. So, a moment. Got my tea, morning tea. So, the Artificer is certainly an interesting class, I have to say. As many of them are very, but Artificer just kind of stands out in the way that since 5th edition was released, Artificer is the first official new class to have been released for it, only being about a year, I believe about a year old at this point. And its first new subclass only coming out a few months prior to now, in the new supplement book, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Very good supplement book, by the way. I love the classes in it. Though a couple people are upset that what was going to be another class, the Psionic, was essentially completely dissected and just turned into various other subclasses for other classes, which, truth be told, I don't mind that very much, because the subclasses they came up with, I think, are pretty cool. In any case, we're talking about the Artificer right now. So the Artificer is very interesting, and so essentially, the Artificer is one who delves into more the creation of magical items. They're not, as far as like the flavor text goes, the Artificer themselves are not a spell caster. They are one who creates objects that mimic spells. With that in mind, it is one of many classes that, as far as overall playstyle goes... Oh, hey, Nick. Yeah. Whenever I do these in the morning. Anyways. Yeah, like many of the classes, the Artificer, whenever they have, like, a class has these more kind of lore-based mechanics and stuff, it's very, like, the OP aspect of it is very heavy, which shouldn't really be a problem. It's an OP, it's a tabletop RPG. It's a very role-play heavy game. As such, the Artificer, it's very important to keep in mind that when you're playing one, you are not casting spells yourself. You should flavor text it so as you are pulling out these weird little objects and trinkets and whatnot that the magic themselves is being shot from. With that in mind, that then comes into play how a lot of the different kind of subclasses act and how the Artificer actually behaves within different settings. Now, the initial Artificer is, of course, built for the official D&D setting Eberron, which is a little closer to sort of your kind of Final Fantasy type, future fantasy sort of setting. Now, the Artificer works perfectly in a setting like this, but I have found in my own experience that it gets a little tricky sometimes in other settings, especially ones that are more your typical, kind of fantasy medieval type settings. You got like your wizards and stuff, casting spells from books and incantations and rituals. Then you got this guy basically using a gun, that can sometimes rub some people the wrong way. With that in mind, though, I feel like that's where a lot of the roleplay as well as different subclasses come into play. For example, one particular subclass for the Artificer that I like is the Alchemist. The Alchemist is a subclass that I feel like can really kind of fit well in most any setting, as you're an Artificer whose knowledge of creating these sort of magical items stuff is not through physical objects per se, but, through potions and tinctures. You're the crazy alchemist up in his tower, or off in the woodland in Hamlet, creating all these crazy potions. that sort of thing. So with that, like, I feel like the Alchemist is one that can fit very easily in most any setting. It's like potions are an established magical item in any setting, and they don't really have any sort of technological aspects to them. So very easy to kind of work in. Now, I would say where it gets to be a little difficult with how to work in an Artificer in a setting is when you get into the other subclasses, predominantly the Artillerist and the Battlesmith. Now, the Artillerist is an Artificer who, basically, the subclasses, they make a magical walking cannon that, well, shoots people. Now, with that one is obviously based on what you can tell from the name, a much more of a kind of ranged-oriented Artificer, whereas the Alchemist is more of a support, almost healer-adjacent type Artificer. That's one thing I definitely give props for the Artificer, is each subclass behaves very differently. Yes, as a matter of fact, the subclass does in fact have their own specific potions. Here, let me look up my examples here. So, the Alchemist. So, the Alchemist actually has, when they hit level 3, as most classes do, when you hit level 3, that's typically when you pick your subclass and when you unlock a lot of your more unique skills. This is, of course, holds true with the Alchemist as well. So the Alchemist has access to an ability called Experimental Elixir. So whenever you finish long rest, you can magically produce an experimental elixir using an empty flask that you touch. Basically, this represents the fact that over a period of the long rest, you stayed up a lot longer. You were mixing up some of your crazy potions and whatnot, and now have them ready for the journey ahead. So with that, you have a number of different options for these elixirs, and kind of like some of the other Artificer's abilities, which I'll be getting into later. You can pick to have more of them active at once, or just choose more of them to know as you level up. Examples of that are they have a healing elixir, which is an elixir that when they or anyone else drinks them, heals them. A swiftness one increases walking speed, resilience, gains bonus to AC, boldness, add a d4 number to attack rolls and saves. Flight. Makes you able to fly. They have a potion that makes you fly. And transformation. The drinker's body is transformed as if by the altar's self-spell. So, obviously, just from your level 3 ability, you get a lot of very interesting options as far as how you can support the party. Which is also another important aspect of the Artificer, I guess I should mention, is the Artificer is definitely a support class. I would absolutely put them in the support role, not as like a frontline tank or anything like frontline tank, not a main sort of damage dealer. The Artificer, in my opinion, is a support. Now then, one of the new subclasses I feel like can definitely work as more of a frontline, but still I would feel better kind of presenting them as more of a support or even kind of second line of defense. But yeah, additionally to that, the Alchemist, each subclass of the Artificer does have an expanded spell list, kind of like the Cleric, Paladin, and Warlock, and so on. So with the Alchemist, majority of their expanded spell list consists of either healing spells, such as Healing Word, or more chemical flavored kind of spells, things like Ray of Sickness, Flame, Acid Arrow, Gaseous Form, things like that. Things that have a Blight, Death Ward. Things that have a bit more of your sort of your Plague Doctor-y type feel to them. That is absolutely the feel they were going for with the Alchemist, I'd say, which I honestly all for. I kind of like that spooky look, with the Plague Doctor mask. Oh no, I'd say honestly, the Alchemist is probably one of my favorite of the Artificer subclasses. I would say Battlesmith is probably a close second, but I think Alchemist really holds the spot for me. Now then, as I was saying before though, though, things start to get a little tricky when you get into some of the other subclasses. One of them being the Artillerist. So the Artillerist is an Artificer whose primary role is they've created a cannon, this mobile walking cannon, and they use that as sort of their means of casting spells as well as doing a number of other effects. So this is much more of a ranged, sort of combative Artificer. Their role is to support more from the back, whereas I'd say the Alchemist is more support from the middle, as the majority of the spells have a shorter range, and you need to be able to get your potions to people. Now with the Artillerist, the additional spells they gain are Shield, Thunderwave, Scorching Ray, Shatter, Fireball, Wind Wall, Ice Storm, Wall of Fire, Cone of Cold, and Wall of Force, which I think is rather interesting that I get access to so many different wall-based spells. I would say that this kind of really goes into my point of them being more of a supportive role, actually, as they have that spell list involves a lot of ranged AoE, and sort of area control type spells. The role of this one, I would say, is definitely to be more towards the back, with him basically see everything, and then launch these different spells from the range of their cannon, where they're able to cover wide areas and really kind of help control the battlefield, similar to how certain clerics do. Not to say that they have the healing capabilities of a cleric, but I would say general similar playstyle is my point, as far as cutting up the battlefield. Now, other than those additional spells, the main focus of the Artillerist is the Eldritch Cannon. So Eldritch Cannon is made in the likeness of either a small tiny creature or just simply a cannon. It counts as a magical object regardless of size, and the cannon has an AC of 18 and hit points equal to 5 times your Artificer level. This is actually one of 2 Artificer classes that have that involves a sort of I guess not creature, but creature adjacent sort of buddy that follows you around, has its own AC and hit points. So that is another thing you got to keep on with the Artificer, is of its 4 subclasses, 2 of them you got to count for not just your own character, but sort of a sidekick type character as well that is controlled by you. Now then, so with the Eldritch Cannon, it is immune to poison and psychic damage, which is very nice. And if it's forced to make a ability check or a saving throw, you treat all of its ability scores as a 10, meaning a +0. So unlike one of the other subclasses I'm about to get into, the Eldritch Cannon, though it can be attacked, take damage and such, it's not meant to be making checks for you, okay? It is a walking cannon. It just follows you around and shoots things. That is what it's for. Now then, you can repair it by using Mending, and if it is destroyed, it disappears if reduced to 0 hit points, or after 1 hour. You can dismiss it early as an action. So essentially the cannon is summoned, or I guess in Artificer's case, created, each time you bring it about. Whenever you create the cannon, you determine its appearance and whether it has legs. So you can actually make one without legs. It doesn't have to be this walking thing. You can just carry a big old cannon around if you like. But it gives you the option for legs. In fact, most people are going to give it legs, have a walking gun. On each of your turns, you can use a bonus action to cause the cannon to activate if you're within 60 feet of it. As part of the same bonus action, you can direct the cannon to walk or climb up to 15 feet to an unoccupied space, provided it has legs. Now then, when you activate it, you get to choose a number of properties. You can choose Flamethrower, Force Ballista, or Protector. Now then, the Flamethrower, the cannon accepts fire in an adjacent 15-foot cone that you designate. Each creature in the area makes a dex save against the spell save DC, taking 2d8 fire damage on a failed save, or has as much on a successful one. The fire ignites any flammable objects in the area that on big want to carry, similar to a spell such as Burning Hands. Another one that I would say, between the two, I prefer this one a bit, excuse me, is the Force Ballista. With this one, you make a ranged spell attack originating from the cannon. at one creature or object within 120 feet of it. So a nice range, especially considering you get this at level 3. On a hit, target takes 2d8 force damage, and if the target is a creature, it is pushed up to 5 feet away from the cannon. And then the Protector, the cannon emits a burst of positive energy that grants itself and other creatures of your choice within 10 feet of it a number of temporary hit points equal to 1d8 plus your intelligence modifier. So once again, you still have some healing capability even as the Artillerist. You're all doubling down on my point that the Artificer is meant of a more supportive role. You're cutting up the battlefield, providing support from range, and healing as well. Now then, as you level up in this class, the cannon itself will become stronger, gain more firing modes, and different capabilities. Now, truth be told, I would say the Artillerist is actually one of the more difficult ones to actually incorporate into a campaign, assuming it's not a campaign that is the Ebron setting or a similar setting, where sort of things have advanced to the point of firearms. Now, yes, it is a magical cannon, but we're still talking about a cannon here, and with the flavor text of the Artificer being that you are almost in a somewhat scientific method creating these magical objects, it is still has a bit of a sort of a future fantasy type flair to it, depending on the setting. Now, there are other ways you can, of course, flavor it. It can be more a steampunky type thing. It can be more straight up just magic. It is magic, and your magic is creating magical objects. Honestly, the preferred method in the group I play with is what we always flavor text the Artificer as they are like a smith or similar type person like the Alchemist, who is trained similar to how a wizard is trained. So with wizards, magic is not a inherited or gifted thing. Magic is a learned and studied thing. So typically with us, we consider the Artificer basically in the same vein. They learn magic. They learn how different objects are granted magic, and they choose to focus their abilities towards granting those objects with magic as opposed to themselves. That is typically the flavor text that we like to use, we being the group I play with, whenever we come upon an Artificer in our settings. One such example was the Artificer I was playing, who played as the next subclass I'll be talking about here, the Battlesmith. So the Battlesmith is another interesting one. So the Battlesmith, kind of like with the Artillerist, but a bit more so, gains a kind of a buddy, similar to the Ranger's Beastmaster, actually, but I would say a little bit better than the Beastmaster. I don't think the Beastmaster is very good. I'm sorry if you like the Beastmaster. I think it's not a good subclass. It feels very weak and takes much too long to kind of get a bit stronger. All in all, I'd say Ranger is not as bad to me as I feel like a lot of people say. It is definitely the weakest class, but I think the Beastmaster gives it a worse rep than it really needs to have. But we're not talking about the Ranger right now, we're talking about the Artificer. So the Battlesmith, the Battlesmith's extended spell list consists of Heroism, Shield, Branding Smite, Warding Bond, or Vitality, Conjure Barrage, or Purity, Fire Shield, Banishing Smite, and Mass Cure Wounds. Additionally, the Battlesmith, I believe they gain extra proficiencies. Let me double check it. No, I suppose not. I thought I remember the Battlesmith gaining proficiency with heavy armors, but maybe they don't. Oh, yes, you do. So the Battlesmith, when you choose this one at the level, you gain proficiency with martial weapons, as well as when you attack with a magic weapon, you can use your intelligence modifier instead of strength or dex for the attack's damage rolls. Okay, so you don't gain heavy armor, you still have medium armor with the Artificer. The Artificer is able to use medium armor, by the way, very important. One of the few classes I'd say that gains both light and medium, but not heavy, with the only other one being certain, I think, cleric subclasses. In any case, so with that in mind, that does put the Battlesmith in a very interesting spot. The Battlesmith themselves are not a heavy armored individual, but they have martial proficiency as far as weapons go, as well as are able to use their intelligence modifier for their melee attacks. Now, With that in mind, obviously, the Battlesmith, unlike the other two, are in fact a melee combatant, but they are sort of a frontline support, I would say. Still a support role. You don't want these guys acting as your primary damage dealer, as even though they're able to do those extra bits of attack, they definitely need to be supported by either another attacker, such as like a fighter or monk, or preferably another frontline tank, like a heavy armored fighter or paladin, I would say. Obviously, these aren't the rules of the game. These are my recommendations, of course. Now then, the main aspect of the Battlesmith is they gain at level 3 their Steel Defender. So the Steel Defender is essentially you gain your own sort of construct, a golem type robotic individual who follows you around. So the book actually provides a stat block for this Steel Defender. When you first gain the Steel Defender, these are their properties. They have an armor class of 15, that is natural armor, so you can't actually increase that armor over time. Hit points are 2 plus your intelligence plus 5 times your Artificer level. And then they have hit dice equal to your Artificer level. So they actually heal in a similar manner that you do as far as rest go. As well as their actual hit points scale with your Artificer level, not necessarily by rolling hit points per level. It's more of a static growth. Strength, they have a strength of 14, dex of 12, con of 14, intelligence of 4, so this is not a sentient creature, wisdom of 10, and a charisma of 6. They have saving throws of a dex plus 1, plus your proficiency bonus, and a con plus 2 plus your proficiency bonus, as well as their skills of athletics plus 2, perception plus 0, and with the perception they actually have they add your proficiency bonus times 2, as they have the vigilant trait, which means they cannot be surprised, and they have a passive perception of 10, plus your proficiency bonus times 2. They're immune to poison and are immune to the charmed, exhausted, and poisoned conditions. And the proficiency bonus is equal to yours, and as you might have noticed, is also how the majority of their stats scale, by adding your character's proficiency bonus. Now then, as far as what it's able to do, it has a melee attack called Force Empowered Rend, allowing it to do 1d8 plus your proficiency bonus force damage. Actually, PB, I believe, is player bonus, not proficiency bonus. My bad. And then a repair ability that allows it to 3 times a day repair itself for 2d8 plus your bonus. As well as it has one reaction called Deflect Attack. The defender imposes disadvantage to the attack roll of one creature it can see that's within 5 feet of it, provided the attack roll is against a creature other than the defender. So the defender cannot use this to defend itself. The defender can essentially only protect others, be it you or one of your companions. Now then, controlling the defender is essentially going to always be taking up your bonus action. You, as your bonus action, command it to take one of its following actions. It shares your initiative, but it will take its turn immediately after yours. So basically, your turn, you would do your action, your movement, and then use your bonus action to command it, and it will. And once you end your turn, it will immediately do what you have commanded it to do. So the only actions. So what it can do on its own is actually able to take reactions on its own, but the only action it can take on its own is the dodge action, unless you use that bonus action to do something else. The action you can tell it to do, you can tell it to. Yeah, you can either have it use one of its stat block options, or you can essentially make it do any of the other actions that are available to just any player character in a combat scenario, as seen in the player handbook. Now, if you're incapacitated, the defender can take any action of its choice, not just dodge. So while you're incapacitated, the Steel Defender essentially goes into full automated mode. It will do any of its actions. The way I like to interpret this is once you're unconscious, it sort of activates sort of a safety on it, and I would think the most logical thing is it would basically use its whole actions to defend you while you are unconscious. That is really the most reasonable thing I can possibly think of it doing. Similar to the Eldritch Cannon, when you cast Mending on the defender, it regains 2d6 hit points. Should it be destroyed, you can actually, has it not died within the past hour, you can use your Smith tools as an action to revive it, provided you're within 5 feet of it, and you expend a spell slot of first level or higher. The defender returns to life after 1 minute with all its hit points restored. Additionally, at the end of a long rest, you can create a new steel defender if you have Smith tools with you. If you already have a defender from the feature, the first one immediately perishes. The defender also perishes if you die. So if you die, it goes away. Now then, as you level up with the Battlesmith, you gain additional abilities that really influence how you attack and do your support. This is a very active fighter on the front line, but is able to provide support while being in the fight, with its primary ability that lets it do so being its Arcane Jolt. So whenever you hit a target, you can essentially choose if you want to harm or heal, is the book's wording on it. When either you hit a target with a magical weapon attack or your steel defender hits a target, you can channel magical energy through the strike to create one of the following effects. Target takes an extra 2d6 force damage, or you choose one creature or object you can see within 30 feet of the target, and healing energy flows into the chosen recipient, restoring 2d6 hit points to it. And you can do this a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier. Now, with intelligence coming up so much with the Artificer, that does bring me to another thing with them, which is I feel like their addition gave a lot more attention to the intelligence stat in the game. Prior to the Artificer, the only class that was a primary user of intelligence was the Wizard. Another point towards Artificer being sort of a learned magical user, just like the Wizard is, as I said. So with that in mind, all the Artificer's abilities and attacks and spells and such all scale with intelligence, which is making them one of 2 classes that use intelligence in this way. All others use wisdom or charisma as far as spellcasting goes. With, I believe, wisdom being the most used one, being used with the cleric, paladin, and ranger. I believe the druid the druid also uses wisdom, and then charisma taken by the sorcerer, warlock, and bard. So with that in mind, intelligence, honestly, other than some other important kind of lore-based stat checks, things like history, arcana, religion, things like that, all things that a wizard would likely know, intelligence is honestly not a particularly all-around used ability, I'd say. Additionally, with the addition of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, they became a lot more prominent in certain spells, as well as the book added a lot more spells that require intelligence saves as opposed to wisdom saves. So that's just sort of a side tangent on my thoughts on the intelligence stat and how this class plus Tasha's Cauldron of Everything really made intelligence a lot more viable in the game. Now, the last subclass with the Artificer is actually the newest subclass, only added a few months back with the release of the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything book. Oh, hello. Now then, so the armor is, put it simply, they are an Artificer who made a suit of power armor. You have power armor, you're basically Iron Man. So, with the armor, you gain the expanded spell list of Magic Missile, Thunderwave, Mirror Image, Shatter, Hypnotic Pattern, Lightning Bolt, Fire Shield, Greater Invisibility, Pass Wall, and Wall of Force. Truth be told, I feel like this extended spell list is kind of a mixed bag. Like, it's kind of just a lot of just different stuff. Like, I can certainly see somewhat of a theme. It's a lot of it's a mix of your sort of ranged AoE, like more force type spells, as well as kind of more subtle illusionary type spells, which I suppose is likely the case, as with the armor, you can actually make 2 different types of arcane armor. Now, this armor has 2 different modes. You have the Guardian, and you have the Infiltrator, which I would say is probably the main point towards you have that bit, those more attack-oriented spells, as well as those more illusionary spells. Now then, when you create this armor, it does not have any strength requirements. If it does, it doesn't have the requirement for you. When you make it as an action, turn a suit of armor you're wearing into the arcane armor. So you need to have armor already, and I believe that armor can actually be any type of armor, as this is the only Artificer to have heavy armor proficiency. So with this Artificer, you can wear any armor, and you can turn that armor while you're wearing it into your arcane armor. The arcane armor is your spellcasting focus, and the armor attaches to you and can't be removed against your will. It also expands to cover your entire body, although you can retract or deploy the helmet as a bonus action. This honestly provides no actual mechanical bonuses, it just sounds really cool. It's Iron Man armor, you are Iron Man. Now, one very interesting thing about this armor that I think is really cool is as it goes to cover your entire body, the armor replaces missing limbs, and they would then function identically to a limb it replaces. So you could be missing, your character could be missing arms, legs. As long as your buddies slap you into your arcane armor, the arcane armor will take the role of those missing body parts, which this, to me, provides the opportunity for some really cool roleplay aspects in this game. You know, you have this like crippled Artificer who despite, you know, missing the arm or legs after a terrible encounter with some dragon or a rival of the trade who want to steal your knowledge, you created this armor to allow you to go out with this adventuring party and get your revenge. Or if you don't want an edgy revenge story, you're just cool guy who with a suit of armor. I mean, there's lots of different stories to come up with. That's just the first thing that came to mind. The inventor who had his work stolen from him, and then he makes some new invention to go get back at the guy. You know, something like that. Any case, so like I said, the armorer has 2 models of the armor they can make, and I believe they can swap it at the long rest. So you have the Guardian. The Guardian, you design your armor to be in the front line of conflict. It has the following features. You have your Thunder Gauntlet. Each of the armor's gauntlets counts as a simple melee weapon while you aren't holding anything in it, and it deals 1d8 thunder damage on a hit. The creature hit by the gauntlet has disadvantage on attack rolls against targets other than you to the start of your next turn, as the armor magically emits a distracting pulse when the creature attacks someone else. You also have your defensive field. As a bonus action, you can gain temporary hit points equal to your level in this class, replacing any temporary hit points you already have. You lose these temporary hit points if you doff the armor. If you don't know, doff basically means to remove. You can use this bonus action a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you gain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. Now then, with the Infiltrator, you're a bit more of a subtle approach. You know, you have stealth armor. You customize your armor for subtle undertakings. It has the following features. Lightning Launcher. A gem-like node appears on one of your armored fists or on the chest, your choice. Once again, Iron Man armor. It counts as a simple ranged weapon with a normal range of 90 feet and a long range of 300. And it deals 1d6 lightning damage on a hit. Once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with it, you can deal an extra 1d6 lightning damage to that target. You also gain Powered Step, walking speed increased by 5 feet, and Dampening Field. You have advantage on dex stealth checks. If the armor normally imposes disadvantage on such checks, the advantage and disadvantage cancel each other as normal. You will also go on to gain extra attack with this subclass, as well as some other benefits for the Guardian and Infiltrator respectively that further make their attacks stronger, as well as some of the infiltrating abilities. Now, the armor is very interesting, I would say. It works in a similar vein as the Battlesmith, I would say, as a flavor text very much can be along the lines of you are someone trained in creating magical items. Essentially, creating magic items is your trade. And this armor is sort of your specialty. You're specialized in creating magical armors, and this is your unique set that you've been working on for a long time. Now, the armor, I would say, is actually probably the least supportive, I would say. Well, not the least supportive, let me rephrase. So whereas the other classes act as support roles basically at the different ranges, with, I would say, the Artillerist being a backline support, the Battlesmith being a frontline support, and the Alchemist being a mid-line support. I would say the armor is actually closer to, I guess, more of like a flex support. So they're very unique in the way that they're actually able to kind of change their role every long rest. Like, one day of adventuring, you could be acting as a support tank, and then the next day of adventuring, you could be acting as a supporting scout with the infiltrator armor modification. So with that in mind, the armor is a very good choice if you want to play an Artificer and you're playing with actually a smaller party, and so you need someone who can kind of swap up their roles on the fly. It gives you a lot of options as far as general playstyle, as well as how to just kind of tackle the day-to-day, and really does give you a little bit to think about, as with all these different subclasses, pretty much every long rest, you can kind of change up some of the main features of the class. The Alchemist, you can change which potions you have available. The armor, you can change which armor you're using. The Battlesmith's a bit more straightforward, I'll admit, but you got to prepare spells and such. Similar thing with the Artillerist, though the Artillerist can kind of change up their Eldritch Cannon's primary firing modes. So with that in mind, the Artificer is a very interesting sort of support. I would still not count them as a main support, as they have a lot of very offensive roles as well, but they are a very nice secondary support and sort of just general, addition to a party, especially if it is, smaller party. I would say good choices would definitely be something like the Battlesmith or Armor. Larger parties, I would say really kind of anything goes. Now then, so the last thing I talk about is the feature that is shared amongst all of the subclasses is the class's primary function, which is infusions. Now, infusions are where we would get into what I talked about with the Artificer being basically flavor texted as someone of a learned magical practice who creates magical items. The infusions act as the book puts it, prototypes of magical items that you're creating. Now then, if you look at the actual level table of the Artificer, similar to how the spells are listed with how many spell slots you have and whatnot, there was a column for infusions known and infused items. As you leveled up, you can choose a number of infusions to know, and the Artificer has a lot to pick from as far as this goes. But you can only have a certain number of infused items at a time. You gain this ability at level 2, and you start with knowing 4 infusions, but you can only have 2 activated at a time. And you can only have 1 per item. Examples of this would be at that second level. Your list is rather small. You can make an alchemy jug, a bag of holding, cap of water breathing, goggles of night, rope of climbing, sending stones, wand of magic detection, and a wand of secrets. Along with this, it always lists if the item requires attunement, with none of the level 2 ones requiring attunement. But some of the later level ones certainly requiring them, with I believe all of the level 10 ones actually requiring attunement. Save for, I think, like 1 or 2 of them. So as you level up, you can learn these infusions, and as you level up, you can actually swap out the ones you know as well. Now then, whenever you create these infusions, you actually have 2 different options. You can either use them yourself, or you can divvy them out to the party. The infusions are created using your modifiers, so like I said, intelligence being one of the main ones. So if there are any sort of like stat-based bonuses to the items, they're going off of your character's stats. And you can dish these out to other members of the party. You don't have to be using them. Your party can be using them. You can share these items amongst the group. You can do things such as enhancing the weapons and armor with some of the enchantments. They can just be more supportive items, like the ones I just read. Things like Wand of Secrets, help you find magical traps and whatnot. Sending Stones, so you can talk to party members from afar. Things like that. Additionally, at later levels, you also gain access to, I believe it is called... What is it called? Spell Storing Item. Yes, level 11 ability. So if you're a spell storing item, you are actually able to, during the long rest, your known spells, you can place those spells within an item. Once again, doesn't have to be your items. It can just be an item that the party is using. Whoever is using said item can gain a number of casting of the spells using their action. The spell stays in the object until it's been used a number of times equal to twice your intelligence modifier. So once you place a spell in an item this way, you can essentially use the spell more times than you honestly would probably be able to do in any given day of adventuring. So when you store the spells this way, either you can use them as your action as just some extra spells, or you can give them to another party member, someone who might be lacking in magical abilities and needs a little help when dealing damage to magical enemies. Now then, additionally, the Artificer gains abilities that allow them to actually attune to more magical items, with the first one being at level 10, allowing them to attune to 4 magic items at once, as opposed to the normal 3. And up to 6 by the time they hit level 18. One of the abilities they gain, the level 20 ability gives them a mystical connection to your magic items, which you can draw on for protection, as stated by the book. You gain a +1 bonus to all saving throws per magic item you are currently attuned to. Now then, I'm a little iffy on this ability. Now, does the ability sound really cool? Yes, but it's a level 20 ability, so it's actually very rare, that, in my opinion, that you're actually going to obtain this ability. And if you have it, you're not going to have it for long, because most campaigns end before level 20, and if you hit level 20, you're probably on the last, the final bad guy, That tends to be how most campaigns go, in my experience. With actually, I believe only one campaign I've played this for, we've actually reached level 20 and ended on level 20. Now, my only kind of issue with that is, especially with how late you get that ability and how many items you can attune to, I feel like this can kind of create a scenario in which the Artificer could actually come to get a bit greedy with magical items. If you're able to attune to so many at once and gain a bonus for being attuned to a bunch, you're gonna be less likely to share those items amongst the party. I mean, we're talking a maximum 6 magic items. How many magic items do you think is going to be in the group, especially when you have a guy who, lore-wise, is capable of creating magic items? That's just something I've thought that, I feel like could be an issue, but honestly, depending on who you're playing with, could be, honestly, zero issue at all. It's a lot of these things tend to be a matter of just who you're playing the game with, of course. So with that in mind, though, that does bring me to my last point with the Artificer, which is within the context of the Dungeon Master Guide and the Player Handbook, listed with the downtime activities, it does list one being able to create magical items. In a lot of games I played in, this hasn't been used much up until recently when I played an Artificer who was the Battlesmith. With that in mind, you are obviously the most likely candidate of a character who can create magical items. So this, of course, would create a scenario in which you want to be able to create permanent items, especially when the book states your infusions are prototypes for permanent magic items. With that in mind, this is certainly the class where you definitely want to, I'd say, talk with your DM about the likelihood of being able to create these items for extended use, as well as sort of what has to be done in order to allow you to do so during downtime activities. Obviously, not necessarily something that's going to come up much if your campaign does not make use much of downtime, especially not for any sort of extended downtime, as better magic items, as stated by the book, take a much longer period of time to create. So yeah, so all in all, with all that in mind, the Artificer, I would say, is a unique sort of secondary support, you know? They probably get their support through the use of magical items that they can, temporary magic items that they're able to create and spread amongst themselves and the rest of the party, as well as gaining a number of benefits depending on the position on the battlefield they're playing, respective to their particular subclass. That's another thing about the Artificer that I do kind of like, is how every subclass just feels so different. Like, you want to basically be on totally different parts of the battlefield depending on where you are playing with which subclass. With the exception of the armor, of course, where basically where you are in a given day could just changes depending on which armor you're currently using. But yeah, so I am interested to see how the Artificer is going to change over time, what other sort of subclasses they may or may not come up with for it. And I'd say all in all, based on the playtest they had going for it for quite some time, I think the final version turned out rather well. So yeah, so that is essentially my overall review of the Artificer, my personal thoughts on the class. I actually like doing this a lot. I'll probably do one of these for some other classes as well. Not sure if that'll be next week or a bit later on. You know, we're a bit finicky on the Mondays sometimes. So we'll just have to kind of see what time allows. But for now, hope you guys enjoyed my review, and I hope to see you next time. Next time we'll see each other is tomorrow night, Tuesday, for some more Library of Verona, and later throughout the week as the regular schedule dictates. So just wish you all a good day and safe travels. Bye.